Jungian and a Witch podcast. I'm your co-host, Molly, the queen behind Queen of Cups Apothecary and your resident witch. This is my dad, Steve, a Jungian analyst with over 30 years experience, a master's in divinity, and a myth expert. Join us as I get the Jungian perspective on a wide range of witchy topics. Hello and welcome to another episode. Today, Dad and I are taking on a really big topic, the unconscious. We'll try and cover as much as we can, but I am sure we'll be back to talk more about this one. We're going to talk about the personal unconscious, the collective unconscious, the id, the ego, our instincts, and our cats. So I hope you enjoy our conversation, and I'll see you on the other side. Well, hello, Dad. Welcome back to another week.
Here we are.
So I did want to bring up, I realized that I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, a bunch of favorite podcasts actually, and I realized that they do something that we haven't been doing, and that's mainly that they have like this 5 minutes of banter before they go into their topic. Your face, I wish people could see it.
I grew up in a television studio, so that's called the talking heads, the two-shot.
Yes.
And when we were in England, I was surprised that, you know how they banter in the news, and especially the morning news? I mean, I realize you don't watch the morning news. We're old. No. We watch, news. It was very disappointing that in England they had the same banter on their morning news show as American shows.
No, they do?
Yeah.
You thought it'd be better banter?
Real news, yes. But at least because they're British, it was funnier.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. At least to us, I guess. It's coming from America.
I'm not sure being funny is my thing, so
it's not, but it just gives people a chance to get to know us a little bit outside of the material, and so I thought I'd bring something for us to banter about for a few minutes before, because I know small talk isn't really your thing.
If you insist.
But what I want to talk about just real quick, we've got our first listener email, and I'm really excited about this, and thank you so much for reaching out, Mia. She says that she really is enjoying our podcast and that it's helped her really understand some of these concepts that we've been talking about. It's been really clarifying for me too, and she wanted to know, so she said you were trained at the Boston Jung Institute, and is that the same as the New England Institute? Has it changed? And so I'm wondering if that has changed since then, or if it's a different one.
Is this the part where I'm supposed to banter?
Oh, well, you could just tell me about the Jung Institute a little bit. I feel like we should record the video on these because your face is priceless sometimes.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it's the same, and
okay.
We changed names a couple of years ago because of the corporate governance structure and to a new one. So it's the same. I mean, there is only one Jung Institute in Boston. So there you go.
Okay, so there we go. I also saw a thing on Instagram and TikTok when I was looking up material, and they have this new thing called a Jungian coach. And it says it uses Jungian psychology principles to help people find their life path. And you can get this coaching certificate. It says it takes 60 hours to get a Jungian coaching certificate.
You know what? How many? 60 hours?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds easier than 10 years.
I just wanted to bring that up to you and let you know that it exists.
It took me 10 years from 1987 to 1997.
And yeah, I mean, some people can do it a little bit faster, but they can't do it in 60 hours for sure.
Do you know that the coaching is a TikTok thing too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
promote your coaching services, and then I guess I have no idea if that's helpful to someone or not. It's not
Mm,
analysis,
yeah, definitely.
and I would say that there's a little bit people when they get started, they want to grow faster. It's like, why is this taking so long? I want to
Right. Yeah.
grow faster. And I keep telling people, you know, you can't make the tree grow faster.
Right. Right. It just takes time.
It it
Hmm.
grows the way it grows. So, um, okay, was that decent
Was that enough
banter?
banter? I knew you were going to give me so much pushback on that.
I,
Not a banter person. I know. Okay. Well, we'll round it out by saying thanks again to Mia for writing to us. If anybody else feels like writing to us and asking us some questions, that would be amazing. We love to hear from you.
right, but no banter questions, please.
If it's just a legitimate question you can answer, I feel like you would do better with that.
That's true.
That's true. See, I'm trying to make it easy for you. Okay. Whew, let me take a breath here. We'll go into our topic. All right, Dad. So today we have a topic that we've touched upon a lot, and I realized we haven't given it its own episode yet, and that is the unconscious. And I know it's going to be hard to wrap that into an hour episode, but we talked about it a lot in Shadow. You know, I think it was very much from the Shadow perspective, and I think it needs just its own episode. So I think we should start with what is the unconscious. And again, tried to look into this on the internet.
And
It was so hard to get any sort of useful definition from anyone. And it basically, the best I could get is unknown driving factors in our life. Like that was really it as far as definitions go.
ooh,
Uh yeah, everything else was really not useful in a lot of ways. I did find one paper that was like the second thing to come up that's from PubMed. And it's
oh
just
my.
somebody doing research on the unconscious mind. I read the beginning part of it, and it's like it says conscious centric bias is due to the part of operational definition within cognitive psychology that equates unconscious with subliminal. And I guess that was kind of one of the closest things I could get to a real definition, but I don't think subliminal is not really the right way of thinking about it. So,
Subliminal is a small aspect of the unconscious.
mm,
Subliminal, right? Latin, below the threshold. The limnus
right.
is the threshold, just below the threshold. So, yeah, subliminal is that which could be conscious. It's not hard to make it
Mm,
conscious, but it is out of awareness.
yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
subliminal is a Jedi mind trick of advertising, for instance.
Right,
A
right.
lot of subliminal stuff going on.
Right, right. The meaning
And,
underneath the
right.
meaning,
And
right.
so then if you become more conscious, your Jedi mind tricks will not work on me.
Because I know what you're trying to say underneath the threshold there. Yeah. Okay. I do like that. But so let's go into unconscious. What is, especially, I wanted to know more of like the history about it because I know there's myths going way back about the unconscious. So I thought maybe we could talk about that and how we came to understand the unconscious as we do today.
Oh my.
I know it's a lot.
So during those algos, you know, that you looked and
Mm,
I on my History of Ideas video channel, that's my main project, right? Is the history of the unconscious.
yeah.
supposed to be 10 episodes and 3 are up. Each one is an hour long. So there you go. It'd take me
Hmm.
10 hours to talk about this. But
Cliff Notes version.
I'll give you the Cliff Notes
Okay, good.
version. So the idea of the history of the unconscious, I mean, when I when I'm doing that video, I mean, let's just start with the word the unconscious,
Right.
which
Hmm.
is a bit of an English translation of the German word, because the term the unconscious was in German,
Mm.
and the first use of the term das Unbewusstsein, back to your German,
Mm.
was in the year 1800
Oh, okay.
by Friedrich Snelling, who
Snelling.
Snelling, yeah, he was, well, one of the post-Kantian German philosophers.
Nice.
It is interesting to think that actually all of psychology, before there was psychology, was originally in philosophy. Philosophy was the place where
Mm.
people talked about our motivations and what makes us do things. It was in philosophy. And
Mm.
it is in that time period, starting in 1800, that psychology begins to be its own thing and separate from philosophy.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that's the origin of, even in 1800, Snelling is coming up with this concept of a very neutral term, that which is not conscious, right? See,
Right.
the
Yeah.
unconscious is a negative term, that which is not conscious.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
So as we move forward in history, famously, Freud then in 1900, 100 years later, is very much talking about the unconscious in
Hmm.
his book, The Interpretation of Dreams.
Right.
So now, as I said in several episodes past, we don't use the term subconscious,
Yeah. Yeah.
of the, underneath of consciousness, except that, especially for Freud, it certainly seems that way. We're talking about
Right. Right.
there is this big thing underneath our conscious
Hmm.
awareness,
Right.
and that we don't know it. Obviously, we have no awareness, no conscious awareness. So originally, Freud was pushing the idea, well, what is in, what it's called, what are the contents of the unconscious
Okay. The contents.
that you can't know and can't see? It's a bit
Mm.
of a conundrum, right?
Hmm.
So originally, Freud thought that the unconscious consists of things that were once conscious and have fallen into the unconscious as an out of awareness. And it's a little bit like the basement. Like everything in the
Uh,
unconscious used to be up on the upstairs floors, and then
mm.
now it has been locked in the basement.
Okay.
And that the reason that this stuff is put down there is because of repression.
Oh,
So this is very big in Freud, the idea
it's
of
the repression.
there is a function called the sensor that censors what is able to come into our awareness.
So that's like your brain has like a thing that sensor
Yeah,
and it
well, and I
filters.
mean, in filter, that's a very good word for it. It's a
Mm.
filter. And for Freud, it's the idea that the job of the filter is to protect the ego from disturbing thoughts and ideas. Disturbing thoughts
He
and
does that.
ideas.
Everything is about keeping you safe from disturbing ideas with Freud. I
Yes.
feel like everything he does, it's like, well,
Well,
so we
when
don't.
you think of the Victorian era,
Right. Yeah, there was a lot of disturbing things going on. Yeah.
well, but then no one could talk about them, or
Mm.
and
Hmm.
then with repression, then no one, not only could you not talk about it, you couldn't be aware of it.
Right. Right. You couldn't
It
even think about it.
it was kind of an absolute denial.
Mm.
And then to give Freud his due is that he's breaking through the denial of an entire Victorian culture.
He's saying, no, no, these things are here. You're just repressing them.
Well, and remember, what is What is the main thing that is in there?
Oh, with Kant is you want to kill your mother. Not Kant, Freud. You
Freud
want to kill
is,
your mother, right? Isn't that always
well,
the...
yes,
Yeah.
but uh, because of sex, right?
Oh, right, right. Everything's a sexual drive. Right, right,
And
right. The
that
monotony, right? The monotony of
monotony of interpretation, right?
interpretation. Yeah.
And then, but you could see how that would be a pretty disturbing thought for a Victorian person.
Right. In particular. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. They would just implode on the spot.
And then just to do the cliff notes real fast, I mean, Freud started with that, but some other psychologists, including Jung, even when he was with
Mm,
Freud, were beginning to talk about instinct
okay. Okay.
and instinctual function and saying, well, that has to be a part of psychology is instinct. And yet
Mm,
we're unaware of how instinct is influencing our thoughts, behaviors. We're,
yeah.
we're unaware that we're engaged in an instinctual pattern. So that
Yeah.
there must also be instinct in the unconscious.
I did remember seeing when I was looking it up, they noted that it says it was one of the first big like times it was used a lot. And it was Darwin talking about unconscious natural selection, like how it's unconscious,
Yes.
which I thought that was cool.
So
But that goes back to instinct also,
that
because
goes
he's
back that
talking with
goes
animals.
that goes
Yeah.
back to instinct, and that's in the 1840s into
Yeah.
1850s, 1860s. And I have a video episode in which Freud, after 1900, I think about 1920, starts to raise the idea of the primal horde.
The primal horde.
Yeah, I have an episode on that, and
It, what is that, like kill the witch or whatever? Like
this is Kill the Father.
kill the father.
Yes, that the Freud is imagining what early human beings were like without
Mm.
being civilized.
Right.
Right. In other words,
Okay.
all those early humans who were not Victorians.
Right. They must have just wanted to kill each other all the time.
Well, because that's what is in the unconscious.
Right. Yeah. When you're Freud, everything goes back to sex or murder.
Right. So Freud was getting pushed about there's more in the unconscious than just repressed personal memory. Like there's a great
Mm.
deal more in the unconscious. It's not. I mean, yes,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yes, there is repressed personal memory, as a matter of
Hmm.
fact. But there's a great deal more than that of when
It's just a little wedge
of
of the whole
which
thing. Yeah.
instinct. And so in 1920, Freud concedes to
Oh.
say, okay, now we're going to have it's called a tripartite model of the unconscious three. And that's the famous id, ego, and
Ah.
superego.
Okay.
But he still, and so the id would be that instinctual unconscious
Yeah.
that we're talking about, the id. Except for Freud, I mean, we can't know anything about it except that the nature of the id is his term, polymorphous perversity. That's what's in the deep unconscious.
That's all there is. It's just polymorphous. Wow. Wow.
Yes, yes. And so about the
Uh,
same time, Jung is describing the unconscious as the matrix of mythopoetic imagination.
whoa. That's a fun term.
It
Say that
is,
one more time.
oh,
The myth
matrix of mythopoetic imagination,
of a mythopoetic imagination.
which,
That is
well,
I like that.
the mythopoetic imagination is essentially where all of our creativity comes from.
Yeah.
Uh, and
That's fun.
and all myths and all symbols, and they all
Hmm.
come from this aspect of the unconscious. I used that in a lecture I had done just to show the difference in the attitude towards the unconscious that
Right. Yeah.
Freud had and Jung had, right?
Freud
So
like has this a disdain for the unconscious.
and a kind of a fear, like
Yeah.
it's dangerous,
Dark and deep,
dark,
and we
and
don't want to go there.
that's right.
Keep it repressed. Keep it repressed.
Keep it well. The ego struggles,
Mhm.
and then Jung has this very different attitude
Yeah.
of
Creativity and
a
poetic
kind of
and
a beauty.
mm,
Although Jung does not at all, deny
the
the
darkness. Yeah.
darkness. See, and then this is it's a little complicated, right? I mean,
Mhm.
darkness has a tendency to have moral overtones.
Right. Yeah. It does.
All this splitting of light and dark and
Yeah.
good and bad.
Yeah, and the association with dark being bad and light being good. That's
That's
something we've been dealing with in the witch community too, because people are light witches or dark witches, or you're a white witch or you're a black witch, and
wow.
not any sort of racist tone, but it's traditionally been like white witches adhere to
It's
the
a
rule of
good witch,
three.
right?
Well, yeah, and they trust karma to
Glinda is the
yeah,
good
it's the
witch,
good witch. Yes,
and
exactly.
what's her name is
Um,
the Wicked Witch of the West. Uh,
right. And
sh-
yeah, but we're trying to move away from those terms because and then, a dark witch is somebody that works with dark, quote unquote dark magic, but it's like where like why do we use light and dark, and why are those terms have sort of racial connotations, especially with the history of hoodoo, which is from Louisiana and African American, and so calling that dark just seems really like racist. And
yeah.
so yeah, the whole witch community has sort of decided that we're getting rid of those terms and we're not going to use that anymore, and
So
we call
that's
it baneful magic instead.
oh, what does that mean? Baneful.
Baneful, sort of with the intent of harm.
Of
um
course. Wow.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So it's a big thing whether or not you do baneful magic or not in the witch community.
Well, you see, that would be like the id, wouldn't
Right.
it?
Mm-hmm. It would.
The intent to harm.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you can see why actually choosing this very neutral term,
Right.
unconscious,
Yes. Yeah.
it
Is way
is
better than
not
sub.
neither light nor dark, neither up nor
Mm-hmm.
down, neither good nor bad, just
Exactly.
not conscious.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as we were talking about the instinctual
Yeah.
unconscious, you see, then do you say, is instinct good or bad? Is instinct light or dark?
Oh,
And
neither. Yeah.
right, right.
It's just instinct.
Well, you know, uh, the lion on the savannah plains in East Africa,
Mm.
is that bad? What the lion does?
Mm.
Is it
Yeah. Hunting, killing,
evil for
eating.
the antelope? Thinks that lions are evil. Uh,
Probably. Yeah.
well, see what I mean?
Mm.
And then, I mean, to take it back to humans, I mean, human instincts, again, they're bad, they're good.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, we need instinct to function, even though, again, we're unconscious of it, we're not aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, in one of my videos, I mean, this aspect of the unconscious is a bit in the nature nurture debate, because when you talk about
Mm.
nature, you mean instinct,
Instinct. Yeah, for sure.
right? And that then nurture is sort of conscious cultural learning, or what is handed down from your
Mm.
parents, so
Yeah, yeah.
or at least we need this other distinction. So Jung starts to make the distinction about 1920, 22, between the idea of a personal unconscious and
Mm.
another word for this instinctual unconscious starts to be the collective unconscious.
Yeah, which is an awesome term.
Because instinct by definition would be collective, because it's all humans of that species. share a common instinctual foundation.
Right.
But the personal unconscious then, and then you would say, I mean, nowadays psychology that isn't Jungian, it only deals with the personal unconscious, which is, that's where everything, trauma,
Yeah, yeah.
issues with your parents, issues with relationships, that's all in the personal unconscious, in the sense is that all of that is a reflection of your personal history.
Yeah, your experiences. Yeah.
And that, yes, those experiences leave a mark
Right.
in the unconscious, in the sense that you're unaware until you do the work, like you remember a thing happened and, well, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know, it was bad, but yeah, but you have no way of appreciating actually it did
it
something.
does. Yeah,
And
like after you
it's,
get in a car accident, and then every time you come up to a stop sign, you kind of freak out and you have to wait for make sure everybody else is gone before you go through, because that's my own experience.
oh, I had a bad one.
Mm,
um
mhm.
we were turning left to get on the interstate, and waiting at the light, and left hand turn arrow, green arrow comes, and
Mhm.
there were at least two cars in front of us, and they start turning left, and this guy comes
Yeah.
blowing through the other side. He's going to blow right through the traffic light,
Whoa.
full speed,
Yeah.
and we're turning left, and your mom was driving, I was in the passenger seat where I was
Oh, you were about to get hit.
smashed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And instead of hitting the brakes, she gunned it. Like
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
floored it.
Mom's got good instincts. Talk about
And
instincts.
somehow we went
Yeah.
fast enough that
He
he
didn't hit you guys.
he he didn't. So yes, I still have a PTSD, is what we're talking about,
Yep. Yep.
reaction to a left-hand turn.
Right. Yeah. Mine's stop signs.
See?
Yep.
Okay, that's your personal unconscious. I mean,
Exactly.
does
Exactly.
does
But your body reacts. Like I'm not consciously, when I roll up to a stop sign, I don't consciously go, I better wait and make sure. My body just goes, nope.
yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah, yeah.
There's not a choice in that at all.
And then, so in the Jungian circle, the personal unconscious is also sometimes called the Freudian unconscious. Uh,
We're just putting all this on Freud.
well, because that's
Because
what
that's his
that's what
bubble,
that's what
you know.
Freud is talking about, until
Mm-hmm.
the concept of the id comes in. But
Mm-hmm.
it's true. I mean, we have a personal unconscious, and I think it's not only human beings.
Mm-hmm.
In my video, I talk about my cats,
Yeah,
that they have a personal unconscious and they have a collective unconscious, or
they do.
instinctual behavior.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
so our one cat, Misty, big black cat, when
Mm-hmm.
we picked them up at the rescue, they could tell us, a little story about
Mm-hmm.
our cats.
Yeah.
And I happen to know that Misty was with a cat lady with 30 other cats.
Oh, wow.
And so he wasn't neglected or anything, but
Mm.
he didn't have a lot of interaction with humans,
Right.
and was very self-sufficient,
Mm-hmm.
always just
Mm-hmm.
on his own, and that he eats super fast. He inhales his food.
Right.
That's
Competition with the other
There were
kitties.
if he didn't eat,
Mm-hmm.
the other cats
He
would
didn't
eat.
get, yeah, any food.
And
Mm.
that continues to this day. So you see how that's his personal unconscious, because he
I
had that
do.
experience, and
Yeah.
that was his childhood.
Right. He grew up like that. So it just lasted.
hmm hmm
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Melissa, our other cat, which we got there too, was part of a litter of a feral cat mom.
Okay.
So
Feral kitty.
yeah, Melissa was just in a cage, after the cat came in.
Right. Okay.
And so, Melissa is the typical scaredy cat.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
very
Mm.
suspicious of anything that moves faster or any people that are unpredictable. And also, Melissa eats slowly. You
Right,
know,
right. Didn't have the competition.
right. That's a
Mm.
personal unconscious.
It is, yeah. What I find
But
interesting though,
both,
my kitten does the same thing though. Because so she didn't have that experience. My kitten was born was a cat that had gotten out and got pregnant, so she is like half feral. And we got her when she was like 5 weeks. And so she's only really known us, but she still eats her food really fast. Like she has competition when she's never had competition before. So I feel like the feral cat instinct is in there because she's very much she's the most fearless cat I've ever met. She will get in the bathtub with you. She like is not afraid of water or anything.
wow.
And so I don't know if that's part of her growing up with us or if that's just feral kitty genetics, but
Well, let's see. You bring up a point that I bring up in the video. If we're going to talk about, nature and nurture,
mm-hmm.
that if you think that your kitten has then taken over these traits of a feral cat because of the mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's called epigenetics.
Oh, right. Okay. Epigenetics. Right.
That the thought that the experiences of a parent can be transmitted to offspring.
It can. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, uh, that's not Darwin. Uh,
No, it's something
that's
else.
there's a term that it's called Lamarckism by
Lamarckism?
a French biologist
Huh.
who had a very different idea than Darwin, and he was saying, well, no, you inherit the experiences from your parent, and his famous example was the giraffe. And then
Oh.
it's like, well, how did a giraffe neck get so long? Is that, well, that's because the original mother stretched her neck and
Mm.
went up. And because she did that to her neck, it was passed along to her offspring,
Okay.
who
Okay.
stretched the neck
Their
further,
their neck and
and then
yeah.
generation after generation. And that's
Mm.
how, and the answer is
Huh.
no.
Well, yeah.
No.
Takes a long, long time for that to happen.
Darwin
Um,
Darwin is, the genetic part
yeah.
is that there is a glitch in which some giraffes have longer necks than other
Yeah.
giraffes.
Well,
And
and it's also about natural selection because the giraffe
well,
with the longer neck has an advantage over the giraffe with the
it's
shorter
called,
neck.
right, selection pressures.
Yes, selection pressures. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that a glitch is a glitch is a glitch. It's just in certain environments, a glitch might be helpful or not helpful.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of it. So what does this have to do with the unconscious? And it is, again, that instinctual part. How do we inherit
Mm.
behaviors?
Right. Right. Well, and one other thing that I find really interesting, my somatics teacher has a story that he tells about how he's always been afraid of planes and he didn't know why. Like he couldn't go on a plane without having like an immense panic attack, but he never personally had any issues with airplanes. And then he found out his grandfather almost died in a plane accident. And so somehow that
Speak,
fear, without anyone telling him that that was a thing, he was still afraid of it.
speaking of epigenetics,
Yeah, I find that very fascinating.
or he inherited low serotonin from his uh, grandfather, and that leads to anxiety and panic disorder
Anxiety.
and panic
Okay.
disorder.
But why would it specifically be about one thing like that?
Uh,
Like you're fine all other modes of travel, but you get in a plane and you're like, nope.
a
Mm,
phobia is a phobia is a
that's
phobia.
true. I
There's
guess, yeah.
there's a list of phobias somewhere, there's, and everybody
Flying's scary too, man. You gotta release control. You're
well,
not in control when you're flying. Like,
that's
you know.
part of it, right? That
Mm-hmm.
claustrophobia, fear of flying is a form of
Mm-hmm.
claustrophobia.
Claustrophobia. Mm.
Is Yeah, the panic at the loss of control.
Mm, I can see that.
And again, now, is that in the unconscious? And the answer is yes, it
Right.
is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's that until you know, you just think you're the only one who has this
Right.
fear.
And then you
And
find out that you're not.
that's right. See?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's in the unconscious too, everything. And then Jung was among the first, in very early Jung, before he met Freud, when he was still working in the psychiatric clinic, that the suspicion that there might be an organic basis for many
Mm.
psychological disorders.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one had
That
that
makes
idea
sense.
before, that something about the brain, there's an organic basis that is causing these symptoms,
Wow. He was the first one to think about that?
particularly in schizophrenia. Hmm.
Oh.
So he suspected already in about 1904 that there was an organic basis to schizophrenia, that it was not caused by having a schizophrenic mother.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Like
But did
that,
they,
that's what causes schizophrenia, is that your
right,
mother, what she did, and really
right.
this, I mean, even when I was in training 30 some years ago, we were taught that OCD is caused by the mother.
Really?
Yes. Now
Whoa. That wasn't
it's
even that long ago.
no, it's laughable now, right? I mean, it's
It is.
utterly laughable
Did they
because
know about things like hormones and stuff like that? Sorry to cut you off, but
no, no,
back in 1904, did they know
oh,
about
no,
hormones and the regulation and stuff like that? No.
nope,
Okay, that makes sense. All right,
no.
what were you going to say? Sorry.
I was going to say that right, whatever, 35 years ago or like that. This was before sort of, let's say, serotonin theory.
Mm,
But it's very clear that OCD is organic. That's what it means. That it's a brain condition. It has nothing to do
mm.
with your mother.
Right, right.
So that there you go.
Huh.
Is that so? That's another aspect of the unconscious, is the organic basis of
Hmm.
of our functioning in the world. And again, you don't know
Mm.
that, oh, this organic condition is causing something and can cause something to happen. So
Well,
there's a dissociative condition in which a person can black out, lose time,
right. Okay.
have complete amnesia. And when I worked in the state mental hospital, the police would bring people
Right.
there off the streets, and we had this one guy, and no ID, no name. He couldn't tell us
Really.
who he was. Total amnesia. We had this hot young doc from Vanderbilt, and
Hmm.
he said, "Oh, it's B9,
Oh,
the
he was
vitamin,"
deficient in B9?
and he got this big syringe, and
Whoa.
stuck him in the butt, and within about 6 hours, he was back to normal.
Whoa. Because of a B9 deficiency?
Uh huh. Speaking of
Whoa.
organic disorders, see,
That's, yeah, that's really mind-blowing.
and I was like, wow, I'm going to be sure and take all my B vitamins because, like,
Yeah, it just proves that is very, very important for your brain health. Oh
to,
my
to
God.
take B vitamins. Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to do more research into
Mhm.
B9 specifically because,
That's
oof.
called fugue syndrome. But by the way,
Yeah, yeah, I
that's
knew there
a
was a word for that. Fugue.
that's a one of
Mm,
the dissociative disorders.
mm.
But none of this is the fun stuff yet. I mean, we're just talking about, but all of this is in the unconscious.
It is.
The
It
the
is.
instinctual part, the organic
Hmm.
part, the personal part, repressed memories,
Yeah, yeah.
that all then manifest themselves in our lives without us exactly knowing what we're doing
Hmm.
or why we're doing it. It's like, well, why did I do that? I don't know why I did it.
Right.
Like that. Okay,
Yeah.
Jung invents another concept to talk about what's in the unconscious, and it's a concept everybody's heard of. It's called a complex.
A complex. Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Like a fugue state would be a complex or
I think if it's an organic basis, it's not a complex, but
but like schizophrenia.
schizophrenia is. But
It's just
back in the day, since they didn't know anything about organic basis of something, that yeah, they were all complexes.
mm-hmm.
Well, after Jung, Freud just used the term neurosis. I mean, that's
Yeah.
yeah, right. So there's neurosis and psychosis, which are again disturbances of conscious mental functioning, and then Jung starts to add the term a complex.
Mm-hmm.
So what is a complex? And I'm like,
Yes.
do you have a complex? Do I have a complex? It's like,
Does
yes,
everyone have a complex?
everybody has complexes, not just one,
Mm,
right?
okay. Yeah.
The technical way that Jung talks about it is a feeling toned pattern.
Feeling toned pattern.
Right. So the idea to me is that at the center of every complex is a center of gravity.
Mm.
So that, and that it's emotional. Like
Oh, okay.
it's emotion. That's the feeling toned part, right?
Mm.
That it
Mm-hmm.
is has a big emotional core. It's a little bit in the personal unconscious. So in a way, a complex is kind of like PTSD is a complex because there was a thing that happened that
Yeah.
is this emotional core.
That makes sense.
But in a way, it's also collective in the sense that there are
Mm.
common complexes that everybody has regardless of your personal experience,
Mm.
let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the idea of an emotional core
What's a
that
complex that's universal?
the mother complex, the father complex,
Oh,
uh,
okay, okay.
the inferiority complex.
Right, yeah.
That's Adler, not Jung, and the
Inferiority.
Oedipal complex. That's Freud, not Jung.
Yeah, yeah.
Of which Jung said, "Oh well, yeah, Freud discovered the Oedipal complex, and he thinks it's the only one."
Right, right. He's very limited, very narrow in his viewpoints. But okay, so I find that really interesting. So we have this core emotional thing,
So
and then a complex like
I
develops around it.
tell people that it's just like a black hole, a complex,
Mm.
which is that. Do you know what the event horizon of a black hole is?
Well, I do after watching Interstellar.
Interstellar, exactly. That's right. So, right,
Yeah.
the event horizon is that point at which no matter what you do, you cannot pull out of it. The gravity is too
Hmm.
strong.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you cross that boundary, then all that can happen is eventually you will be pulled down and through the center of the black hole,
Correct. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is what happens in the movie. You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a complex is just like that. It's like if you get triggered, to use the word,
Okay.
right? Like that is the pull of the gravity of the complex.
Okay. We're going down.
And you have a very, very short window to consciously recognize you've been triggered.
Hmm.
Very
That makes
short,
sense.
like, as in,
Yeah.
you may have 5 seconds to recognize what's happening and pull out of it. See, that's like the black
Mhm.
hole,
Yeah, I
which, of
see.
course, before you do any psychological work, I mean, you have no idea, and you just get sucked in the hole. I mean,
Right.
that's
You don't even know that it's happening. It's
your,
just
and
there.
Jung says, well, Jung says in the long run, the ego is a complex also. The ego itself
Oh.
is a complex. But when you're pulled into this other complex, now the ego is gone.
Mm. Hmm.
And you are gone. You are just,
Right.
everything you say is coming out of the complex. It's the complex acting, speaking, behaving now.
Mm.
So, for instance, let's say anger. This guy has an anger management
Problem. Yeah.
problem,
Okay.
and it's true. I always tell people that that is actually Hulk. I mean, and it is, in
The
fact,
Hulk.
the
Oh.
story of Hulk is a picture of a complex.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
So that, yes,
He gets triggered and then he
yeah,
just
there's Bruce Banner. He's the ego.
Mhm. Right.
But when he gets triggered and then he goes down the black hole, he
Hmm.
has no memory. You know,
Right.
and
He
then,
just becomes the Hulk. Yeah,
and then
yeah.
he wakes up in a field somewhere with
Naked
his
somewhere.
clothes
Yeah.
on and says, "What did I do this time?" Right?
Exactly. Hmm. Well, and that's why
'Cause-
his whole story arc is trying to control that threshold,
right.
right? Yeah.
Yes. Well, and I guess in the recent movies they have him being Hulk while also being Bruce Banner. I mean, that's
He integrates the two.
right. Well, so there is. I mean, there's the integrating of the complex, but uh, I think you can't, in the long run, eliminate a complex. You can
Mm,
only become aware of it and depower it to some extent. But that again requires this thing of you start to be aware of being triggered,
right. It's the awareness part.
and then you learn some strategy to do something different than to go
Mm.
down the hole.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that also reminds me that the complex is like the old AA story. This, in AA they talk about this all the time, and that's the story of the hole in the street.
The hole in the street.
Yes. So
Okay, I don't know this one.
it's also just like a complex. Well, it's the idea that there's a guy, he's going to work, and he's
Hmm.
listening to a podcast, and
Sure.
and they're doing construction, and they dug a hole, and he falls in the hole.
Oh.
And then, it takes time and all this stuff to get him out of the hole like that. And then the next morning, same thing. He's walking to work and the headphone on, and he falls in the hole. And then he says, "Oh, right, there's a hole. I forgot there's a hole here." And then the next day, he falls in the hole
Oh gosh.
until one
Eventually he learns.
one
Yeah.
day he's getting right to the place, and then he says,
Hmm.
"Oh, right, I remember. There's a hole here," and he walks a different direction.
Okay.
See,
Yeah.
that's the
It's the awareness.
doing
Yeah.
something different.
Hmm.
It's like when you
Hmm.
fall into the complex, every time you're falling in, you're stepping to the right. Eventually, with awareness, you can learn to step to the left.
Right. Right.
And then you don't
Yeah.
have to go into the black hole. But again, there's a window once you pass the event horizon, no matter what you do, you're going
Yeah.
to fall in the hole.
Okay. Well, it's a very
So
useful analogy.
yeah, and I use Hulk and everything with anger management people because it's just like
Right.
that, right? So
Yeah.
see that,
Yeah.
so that's unconscious, right?
It is.
Until it isn't. I mean, but
Mm.
think of how much work it takes to make it conscious.
Yeah. To be aware that these things are happening. It takes a lot of practice for
And
sure.
so let's say, how conscious are people really?
I mean,
And when we say
10%?
and when we say conscious, right? I think we have to. I have to use the term ego consciousness because
Mm,
consciousness is a whole problem in and of itself. What is a consciousness? But
right.
that's for another episode because today we're
Yeah.
talking about the unconscious.
Unconscious. Yeah. Put that down for another
So,
episode.
so to have ego consciousness, right? I would say, yeah, something like 10%. The
Mm,
rest of our day, we're 90% unconscious. In that,
autopilot.
when
Yeah.
you're on autopilot, that means the complexes
Right. Are running the show.
are running the show, the instincts are running the show,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and you're completely unaware. And so when things happen, it feels like there's no rhyme or reason. It's like, so then you're the kind of, I
Mm.
just live and these things happen to me and I don't know why they happen and I don't like it. I wish it would stop happening, but it happens.
Mm.
What can I do? See what I mean?
Right. Right.
Right.
So.
Like the guy, has a
Falling
panic
in the hole.
and the
Oh,
panic
panic
attack,
attack.
getting on an airplane.
Mm-hmm,
What? Well,
mm-hmm.
what can I do? And it's like, well, actually, there's some things you could do.
Right, right. Well, and I think getting that awareness is definitely the first step. Like recognizing you have a problem, right, is always the first step in fixing the problem.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we haven't talked about the archetypes of the unconscious.
The archetypes of the unconscious. Now that think we're getting into some of the mythic stuff too now, hopefully, right?
Well, as I think what we had an episode on archetype, right?
We did. We had episode of archetype, we had episode on shadow.
Right. So now we just have the idea of the unconscious, so that, like,
Mm-hmm.
again, what are the contents of the unconscious? And we talked about
Yeah.
all the personal stuff and the trauma stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the personal side. We've talked about the instinctual stuff, instinctual functioning.
Yeah.
Now, Jung sort of puts together this idea that in the deeper unconscious, that is a parallel to instinct, are patterns of
Hmm.
functioning.
Okay.
Again, like we talked about in the episode, right? It's like the crystalline lattice
Right.
that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
There is an underlying pattern that shapes something into a form, but when it crystallizes, it's already not the archetype. It
Right.
has become a specific thing. The archetype is a form of a pattern, and that also is we're unaware of it until we're there. So Jungians talk about that as constellating an archetype.
Constellating. Like a constellation. Constellating.
It's sort of evoking it or getting in a situation that now starts to parallel the pattern. And then once the pattern
Mm.
starts to constellate, then unconsciously you have to go through the entire pattern.
Okay.
And that way it's like a complex, right?
Right, right.
So we've talked about the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
well, how is that constellated in a person's life?
Ah,
I mean,
okay.
is everybody on a hero's journey? And I'm sorry, that's too milquetoast for me. No, everybody is not on a hero's journey
Right.
until you start to do the things.
The things. Yeah.
Then you're on a hero's journey, but not until. And again, the archetype of the hero
Mm-hmm.
is constellated, let's say, certain events constellated, and then you begin to follow the pattern,
Right.
and fairly unconsciously, like
Mm-hmm.
the hero goes through trials, the hero goes through the separation from home,
Mm-hmm.
the hero has to face herself.
They have some
Well,
sort of grand mission they end up having to
and then
quest.
sort of a denouement moment, right? The moment in
Mm-hmm.
which either the hero succeeds or fails. And FYI, right, like that is Luke Skywalker,
Right,
intentionally,
right.
that George Lucas read The Hero
Mm-hmm.
with a Thousand Faces, uh,
Right. And
you know,
then made
and
Luke.
read about Joseph Campbell's description of the hero's journey, and intentionally made so the first three
Yeah.
are the journey, that
So the constellated part would be like when Luke's aunt and uncle's house like burns down. Like he doesn't really have a choice anymore, and he sort of unconsciously then has to
yeah,
go on this journey.
it's the background. You could say it's really constellated when Obi-Wan comes.
Ah, right. Mm-hmm.
So again, let's say this figure of the wise old man, the archetype of the wise old man,
Yeah.
the wise old woman, somebody comes into your life. See how unconscious it is? It's like
Right.
you will begin to relate to this person as the archetype of the wise old man.
Right. Right. It
whether
just
you're
happens.
whether you're aware of it, you're doing it or not, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's constellated.
Yeah, I see that.
And then
Okay.
the pattern is going to play out.
Right.
Let's say, I mean, an archetype is not a human being, and we talked about
Oh.
that with
Mm-hmm.
anima and animus and
Right, right.
all the things. So there's is a little bit this danger of that the archetype is constellated, but Obi-Wan is just a guy. He's just a man,
Right. He's just a dude that's been through a lot.
as opposed to saying he is the wise old man.
Right. Right.
So this brings us back to another kind of complex pattern. Let's say Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz.
Okay. Yeah.
That was one of my first published papers. Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, an analysis of a case of hysteria.
You published a paper that is
Oh yeah,
about the Wizard of Oz. How
yeah.
did I not know this? That's
Oh,
hilarious.
it's a great paper. I like it. But
Yeah.
see that it is the pattern of hysteria plays out. There's no way around it. So that
Mm.
yes, Dorothy is hysterical, and that's
Mm.
what going to Oz means. And
Okay.
she's hysterical because it is so bleak in Kansas. Her
Right.
parents died. She's an orphan. She's being
Mm-hmm.
raised by her aunt and uncle.
Yeah.
And in the Frank Oz book, I mean, it is much
Brutal.
bleaker than the movie. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they give her very little nurture, empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the archetype of the wizard is constellated.
Ah. Okay.
And in her case, the wizard is the father. I mean, to be Freudian about it,
Yeah.
the wizard is the father, and it's sort
Okay.
of constellated because it's the archetypal father. It's what she needs.
Mm-hmm.
But her transference, there's a whole nother episode. Okay,
A whole nother
but
episode is transference.
on to again, he's a man.
Right.
And so what's beautiful about the story is the whole thing when in the end she opens the curtain and sees the
Right.
man behind the curtain.
Right. So she
And
sees that he's really a man and not this archetype.
that breaking of the transference, right? Then
Hmm.
she's upset.
Right.
That
Right.
and this is in the book, right? You are a very bad man.
She
And
says he's a very bad man.
oh yes. When she
Oh,
discovers, it's like, how could you
yeah.
do this to trick everybody?
Mm.
And he says, my dear, I'm not a very bad man. I'm actually a very good man. I'm just a very poor wizard.
I'm just a very poor wizard.
Mhm.
Oh, that's
Now,
great.
that gets it, right? Is that
Mm-hmm.
you can see that he knows that he is not the archetype, let's say,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and that this projection or transference of Dorothy that created the wizard,
Yeah. Yeah.
that would be the constellating of the archetype
Mm.
in her head, right? I mean,
Right. Right.
in her head.
Mm.
And then she goes through and does all the things you do if you have a wizard.
Right.
Uh, if you're relating to a wizard, yeah.
Right. Right.
Is that making sense now about how
It is.
that's a
Yeah.
part of the unconscious, that there are a multitude? I mean, how many archetypes? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, many, many that are unconscious patterns of
So
events, behavior.
it's kind of like manifesting. I mean, it's
Yes,
like you
it's
constellating and manifesting.
constellating. It's manifesting, right?
Yeah, I see similarities to that. And I think manifesting is a word that gets used a lot, but could maybe be understood. And
But if you're not aware that
you're
it's happening,
manifesting something. Yes.
it's happening again. Back to
Hmm.
this more unconscious person. We won't say names. These things just happen to me. I don't know why they happen. I see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, because they don't realize that they're manifesting it.
Yes.
Mm. Okay. And all of it's coming out of the unconscious
It
because of
is.
the either the, like we talked, the biological factor, or there's some underlying thing that's sparking,
Mhm.
that's constellating, manifesting this into a reality.
Right. So we have those. I guess now we have a list of four things, right? I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
we have the personal unconscious.
Right.
We have instinctual functioning,
Right.
and we have organic functioning and disturbances of organic functioning.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're at complexes.
Yeah, complexes.
Okay, our list is five because
Okay,
now,
what's the
and the fifth
wait,
is constellating of the archetype.
okay, okay. Well, do you think the constellating of the archetype is an effect of the other four, or do you think it's its
No,
own thing?
it's its own thing. It's universal.
Oh, okay.
Let's say the developmental stages of life.
Mm.
I guess, see, there's another episode on the developmental. Uh,
Okay.
so, I mean, you have a child and you know that children go through developmental stages.
They do. Oh boy.
So the question is, how do they know to go through developmental stages?
Mm. Yeah, it just happens.
They don't know. Right. They don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Well, see, now you're like our person who's like, oh,
Yeah,
it just
it just
happens.
happens.
I don't know why. It's just it happens.
I can imagine my 4-year-old in her little voice.
Right.
Like, I don't know why.
Right.
It happens.
But it doesn't just happen. There is the
Right.
underlying pattern
Mm-hmm.
that is
Mm-hmm.
the human pattern
Yeah.
because it's universal and
Yeah.
developmental.
Yeah. And it's
A kind of growth in a certain period and another kind of growth in the next period. And
yeah.
also, way above it all, there is a kind of intelligence about how all of those developments fit together.
Right. The steps.
The
Because you can't
steps,
go to C before you do A.
right. And again, how do you know that? And the answer is you don't
Mm-hmm.
know it, but it plays out. Whether you know it
Right.
or not, it plays out. And even if you know it, it's going to play out. Like it,
Right. Right.
right? And then
Yeah.
just to finish, the idea would be you do realize that the developmental stages of life don't stop
Yeah. Like you
when
turn
we're
21 and you're like,
it's
I'm an
not
adult. Woohoo.
it's not only for kids
Yes,
that
exactly.
there are developmental phases that adults go through.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think the path gets a little less linear once you're an adult, but I think
mhm.
there are definitely still stages.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, famously, Eric Erickson, described 8
Mm-hmm.
developmental phases from
Phases.
birth to old age,
Mm-hmm.
of which,
Mm-hmm.
right, old age is a developmental phase.
Yeah.
And see, there's the archetype. I mean, it's that you can't avoid it, even if you know that this is coming, because it's a phase everybody goes through.
Well,
But
yeah, we all get old. We can't
and
stop that process.
it happens in a certain pattern.
Right,
See,
right.
that's the archetype part.
Huh.
It happens in a
Mm-hmm.
certain pattern. You
Oof.
will give your own answer, your
Yeah.
own individual, unique way of going through it when it happens.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
but it will come.
Right, right. Because everybody goes through it. Unless you die prematurely, I guess. All right. Well, we've talked about a lot, Dad, but I'm going to just check in and see if there's anything else. We've answered my questions for the most part. We might talk about unconscious myths on our own episode here, but is there anything else that you think we really need to know for this baseline about the unconscious before we close out?
I would just finish with saying instead of being so fearful, like Freud,
Hmm.
of what is there, that it is actually freeing and makes life more interesting and wonderful to participate with
Yeah.
the unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
especially in these developmental aspects, or we talked about ego and self. to not just be a passive rider, like we just, well, I don't know where we're going or what we're doing. I'm just here.
Along for the ride.
Yeah. As opposed to there's still the ride, but then to be aware and participating during the ride.
Right. Yeah.
Well, at least to me, it makes life interesting.
Yeah. I think there's a certain curiosity, being curious about the why we do things and the way that we do things. And I think just coming at it with a curious mind helps a lot, which we are both very blessed with having a very curious mind. So
there you go.
All right. Well, thanks again, Dad, for talking about the unconscious with me. And it's definitely sparked. I have at least 5 different things written down in my notes now for us to cover in future episodes. So
oh boy,
it's definitely a good gateway for that. But thanks again. And thank you guys for listening. And we'll be back next week for another episode.
Take care.
All right. Bye, Dad. I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation on the unconscious. It definitely gave me a lot to think about, and I know we'll be revisiting this topic. If you want to learn more about us, go to our website, ajungianinawitch.com. If you want to learn more about me, go to queenofcupsapothecary.com. And for more from Dad, head over to History of Ideas on YouTube. As always, feel free to reach out to us at ajungianinawitch@gmail.com. I would love to get some listener questions to get Dad to answer and help him with his banter. So thanks again, everybody. And I super appreciate you listening to us. And if you could be so kind as to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, I think it would really help us reach some new audience members. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. I hope if you are in the US, you had a wonderful Memorial Day. And we'll see you next week for another topic.